Buonasera a tutti.
Good evening, everybody. We'll start right away because we never have sufficient time for these meetings. We're here to look together at something that actually took place. So before we see the effect that it had on doctors, nurses, and also administrators of the hospital, I beg your pardon, we want to find out who Giulia is. Giulia Gabriele was born in Bergamo in 1997. She therefore was 12 years old when in 2009 she was found to have a sarcoma of the arm. She had heavy treatment, the hope of being healed, and then she fell ill again. In June she passed her middle school exams, and in 2011 she died, or she met her Lord, which was beautiful. In her own words, indeed, as a great finale of healing would have been, because she had many plans in life that she wanted to take hold of with both hands. Giulia died when the Via Crucis of Madrid had just taken place, and she wrote, just before she died, a few verses of praise to the Lord. But this doesn't tell us who Giulia is. Giulia really, in fact, wanted to present herself. In 2009, she had already won a literary prize for the middle school, and very tenaciously in 2000 to write a book on her adventure as a sick person. She had a dream of writing a book, she said, to say that he is there, that he is always by our side. When she was no longer able to write, she recorded pieces, and we have to thank Fabio Finazzi, a journalist of the Bergamo section of Corriere della Sera, for having helped to complete the book when he asked certain questions of her, and she didn't know the questions, and Giulia gave answers in such a surprising way that a video, in fact, was created, made up of photos and music that she herself chose. As her father said, it's not a video, it's really Giulia. It's a gift of Giulia, which has allowed for more than 200 encounters. So much was she in love with the idea of bearing witness. She gave us this video, and thanks to Nazareno Cortinovis, who is a friend of the family. Of course, we can't see the whole video this evening, but I wanted a short snippet of this to be presented to you, for you to understand who Giulia was, and we'd like to thank her parents who are here today. Then you can get to know her better reading her book, which is available here. Why have we wanted this meeting with the hospital operators to start with a presentation of Giulia? Because it really is very close to the theme of the meeting, the human person and emergency. It's because a normal girl like Giulia shows us much, much more than any other words as to how great the humanity of man is. And I think this is very, very important for people who work with patients like us, because we can only heal and treat men if we know who men are, and we really understand them, understand their hearts, their desires, where the need for beauty and happiness shouts out against disease and suffering. And this is all the more important in a time of crisis when resources are scant. And therefore, we thought that there was an important secret to be picked up on in Giulia's story. At the Bergamo hospital, we were able to see with our own eyes that something really did happen. Somebody happened, Giulia, who overturned a hospital and generated an extraordinary change by the way that she lived her life. And as she said, not by chance, her life included a disease. Apart from getting her parents to change their views, she also broke down the wall between her and the people who treated her. And that's why we have invited here the people who were really touched and dragged along by her. We wanted to invite these people, and they have understood that something very important happened to them for their own lives and for their own work. These are the nurses and pediatricians who treated Giulia, because each of us, in fact, come across surprising things. But it's not often that we really are completely changed by what happens to us, by the way the hospital was organized and things developed. When this really takes place, when this experience takes place in such a different situation, one is really changed. We are surprised, but at the same time, one is surprised by the fact of how much it corresponds to what one really wants in one's deepest heart. And this encounter was that for us. Like this meeting, it shows the possibility of a new and satisfying and effective way of doing one's job as a doctor, a real reason for getting up in the morning and going to work. These people who are here have not set aside what they experienced with Giulia. Indeed, they have come here. And they, in fact, are here. As she saw them, the team of her superheroes. And they were superheroes for Giulia because, for three reasons, they help save human lives and they make you feel you're important for them, and that helps you to go on. And also, they are with you all the time. The words of Giulia, when they were embarrassed to tell her that the disease had taken up again and had come again, she, in fact, surprised them with the fact that she just asked them to be close to her. Now I'd like to give the floor to the pediatrician who treated her, and he is formerly in charge of the Pediatric Hospital of Bergamo, but is a voluntary worker every day on the wards. And Giulia says he, in fact, hugged me longer than I was able to hug. He was able to do this for Giulia. Dr. Cornelli.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you that I am a former superhero, not so strong and with white hair, and I was not considered by a grandfather by Giulia. Sometimes when the children cry when they see me, their parents say, "It's like grandpa." But it was an honor for me to be together with my younger colleagues, Dr. Provenzi, who was called the Wolf Alpha, and many others, Dr. Fogli, Cavalieri, and Morali. It's a honor for me to have been able to work with them and Giulia. Before coming here, I asked myself a question which I asked myself many times. So what is the heritage of Giulia? I read her book many times, and I would like to respond with some key words. The first is a responsibility or accountability. Giulia was fully aware of the severity of her condition. But still, he was able to face it not like a tragedy. She considered the disease as a terrible enemy, but she was able to fight with the same weapons, and she did not consider herself defeated right from the start. And this is something that should be used also by adults when they are so unfortunate to get cancer. So she was very responsible. It was like magic for her. This is something which, in a way, we were able to adopt. Doctors, we felt really stimulated by her presence. When she spent the whole day in the hospital, or she was hospitalized in the ward, we used to say, well, be careful, because Julia is here today. She always asks questions concerning the reason for a certain therapy, or why certain side effects. Jesus, when speaking to the apostles, he used to say, I'm here to bring fire, and Julia was like the fire for us. And indeed, the fire under the ashes is still there. The second key word is hug, embracing. Julia, as we heard in the videotape, stressed that it's very important to be hugged and to hug others. Maybe the message is that loneliness can only be fought by solidarity and by being humble to embrace the others. When you're ill, you feel alone, and this happens to family members, elderly people, and when we are ill, we are depressed, not only when the other people do not come close to us, but when we are too proud to admit that we need others. A much more humane medicine. Sometimes doctors find it difficult to understand that patients need to be supported by doctors morally and psychologically. Sometimes, we have a personal burden when we go to the hospital to work. Often so, when doctors have very severe diseases, they are able to approach patients in a different way because they had experienced the same feelings. And we have always been stimulated by Julia, and she was very frank and explicit in asking us to be close to her. The third key word is dream, or dreaming. She used to say, I have a lot of projects, I am a dreamer, I want to leave something behind me. She was not able to implement or to achieve her dreams. Her idea was to become a pediatrician to treat cancer, but she achieved her dream, i.e. to leave something behind her. I'm old, I won't be able to achieve all my dreams, but this is not important. My best dream is that every one of us, we have to leave something behind us for the others, to hand over something to the others. If we are able to do that, that would mean that we have been able to love others and to have a very affectionate relationship with them. The fifth key word is faith and love. During her disease, indeed, these two feelings were intertwined. She trusted us a lot. She believed in God. She was sure that we are not alone, and the only important thing is to be able to love the others. Well, even if we lose something, and this is a critical point, well, if you lose something, if you lose some safe points in our lives, is being heroic. And the word love, well, she continued to repeat it when she was terminally ill, as we heard in the videotape. It was as if she was saying, loving other people is not so easy, but anyway, that should be our first thought when we wake up in the morning. The sixth and last word is Thanksgiving. Indeed, apparently her life was defeated, but in the end, she's there to thank her parents, her little brother, and God. And her relationship with death is like the one of St. Francis. He said, the death, my sister. And now I would like to quote a couple of pages taken from her book, which can tell you how she tackled the disease. Well, after the diagnosis, I started thinking of death. I was not afraid. If that is to happen, I can say that I don't mind. I mean, I would love to have a long life and to achieve all my dreams. But still, death is something I'm not afraid of, because I have Chiara Luce Badano. She was a girl who died because of cancer a few years ago. I know that after death we have God, so I'm going back to God, who is so good, and He will hug me. And then we have the Virgin. I'm happy I'm going to meet them. Indeed, I'm craving to meet Him and to thank them for everything they do for me. I'd love to, well, when I'll die, if that will happen, God to welcome me for what I am, Giulia Gabrielli. Since I like to be beautiful and elegant, I'd like to be like that. I want to have the same dress that I used at the communion of Davide. I want God to accept me for what I am. Maybe a bandana, a wet bandana, and then a bunch of flowers for lilies, for orange flowers, and a red rose, and my crown of Pope John Paul II. I don't want to make up. No sequins, no little bag. I would like to be simple with my little thing. No bracelets. I will only will use the one I got in Medjugorje. That was a gift from a friend. So when you are in heaven, so they say you pray all day, so I will have to get used to that. I'm not really happy to pray all day, but anyway, I learned. And then, if I'll have to use shoes, I will like to have wet ballerinas. In case this is not necessary, I will be barefoot. I suppose that we'll have a floor full of clouds. I think it will be wonderful. It will be very soft to walk on clouds. You can jump everywhere. Heaven, like the one we have the cartoons. This is what I think of heavens. It's like in the Ice Age, when the little thing find the big nut, the hazelnut with the golden gate. So you open the golden gate, and everything is wonderful. So in the end, her spirituality was able to overcome the disease and eliminate the distance between doctors and patient, and she was able to make heavens closer to the earth. Thank you very much.
Sentiamo il dottor Massimo Provenzi.
Now I'd like to call upon Dr. Massimo Provenzi, who is in charge of the oncological department in the hospital of Bergamo. I'd like to say that I am lucky. I do a job I believe in, and this is a great opportunity, and also it's a commitment. And I work in a team of colleagues and friends who naturally were selected and motivated. I think that the head who created this group is Dr. Cornelli. In fact, I got to know him 20 years ago when I came to Bergamo for the first time to work. Now, the story of the treatment of Giulia has one thing which is great, and we have taken this to our heart. They said, we heard that you always say, all of you, the same thing. You seem to speak with one voice, and this is the real meaning of working as a team. The story of the treatment of Giulia, in fact, tugs the strings of our profound motivations for taking up the medical profession. In other words, why do you do this job in pediatric blood cancer? There's a great joy that we have because we can heal people in 75% of cases, but there's great pain and suffering for the defeats. There's a hard core of non-curable diseases. We can't hide these behind the successes that we have. But the theme today is how Giulia wiped away every distance. But what's the right distance between a pediatric oncologist, the patient, and his family? Something comes to my mind about 1 year before this story started happening, when, in fact, I had to help a colleague who, in fact, was really overwhelmed by the death of a child. And I said, well, we mustn't get too involved. We are technical people. We have to maintain our clear-headedness to be able to help the patient. But when I said these words, I thought, is it really like that? And I thought to myself, it's not really the case. Luckily, I have never really learned never to be involved. Therefore, the question comes again, what's the right distance? If you travel in an airplane, and you're a bit frightened like I am, you read the instructions very carefully that recommend to parents in the event of a loss of oxygen and loss of pressure to put your own mask on before you do that for the child. And I was really worried about that. But if we think about it, to help a child, the person helping the child must be clear-headed and be well oxygenated. And therefore the doctor has to maintain a certain lucidity. But that doesn't mean that he has to harden his heart and make it insensitive and just make his medical gestures pure technical gestures and not use this attitude to flee from patients that can't be healed. The important thing is to be there, showing compassion and humanity. Compassion is a sentiment whereby an individual perceives emotionally the suffering of others, feeling a desire to alleviate that pain. And I think that's really quite true. And this story talks about all these things and a little girl who had very clear and very personal ideas about what the right doctor-patient relationship should be. But at the same time, she bore witness to something much greater than us and which changed definitively the way that we live and way that we act as doctors, enriching it. Giulia was a young girl at the threshold of adolescence with great joie de vivre. When she had greatest potential and highest prospects, it's almost as if you wake up in the morning and have a whole day ahead of you, and there's no greater contradiction than becoming ill with cancer in the spring of life. Giulia wrote fantastic stories in which Mother Nature is both generous and pitiless at the same time. In a story, she in fact gets lost in a wood and is saved by her superheroes who are doctors. How can you not get involved in that? Of course, getting involved is very dangerous, and if in fact the disease takes hold, it'll be further disappointment. We thought we had to bring her back to a sense of reality. But in fact, at the first time, the treatment worked and the disappearance of the disease was seen. It's called remission, and we were joyful altogether, and we thought about the idea that she might be definitively cured, even if we were rather worried. The scientific data speak very clearly. But without optimism, you can't do our job. And as Antonio, Giulia's father, said, we have to still hope, and hope has to be writ in capital words. But the beast, the monster, was just biding its time and came back even worse than before. Now we asked ourselves, what will our relationship with Giulia be? She will think, everything I've done is not been worth it. And I knew that we shouldn't get ourselves involved to that point. But Julia surprised us. She said, well, look, you're still my superheroes. I'm willing to start the treatment all again. I just want you closer to me this time. And then she hugged us. She was a girl with a profound faith, chemotherapy, radiotherapy, and a journey to Medjugorje just helped to strengthen her. And in some cases of apparently impossible cases, did get better. So why not? We thought, would Julia not get better? But unfortunately, this was not the plan. Julia, in fact, changed, talking about the stories of the Spirit, but not in a fanatical, bigoted way, but with extraordinary simplicity. One morning, on the anniversary of her parents' marriage, she cried and with tears in her eyes said, that love between a man and a woman generates life. It's so simple and so perfect. And we asked ourselves, well, how can this little girl know these things? She started talking about a mission, about bearing witness. She said, in this ward, we need more presence of the Spirit, more hope, she said. And she then said something I still don't fully understand. She says, yes, I love life. I've got so many things to say, to do. I want to get better. But if this is not to be, it doesn't matter. I have known the love of God, and going to him will be equally beautiful. Now, me and my DNA have healing written into my being, and I felt completely askance at these words. We continued the treatment, but then we knew that it was hopeless. What sense is it to treat a disease that will not be cured? We are taught to administer drugs to heal the body or treat the body. The psychologist and the psychiatrist tries to heal the mind. But what and how much should we treat if death is what will happen? Medicine is a difficult science. You have to cast yourself and your methods continuously into question. You have to be very attentive and be able to listen and understand when the positive effects of chemotherapy, in fact, do not exceed collateral effects. We realized we have to listen to Julia and her parents. We all grew and grew up, and we realized that if we didn't lose this being together, we would not get it wrong. Going to see a patient, so-called terminal patient, at her home means, in fact, accepting defeat. It means leaving one's own territory, the hospital, one's medical coat, and so on, and going into unknown terrain of intimacy. And going to see a terminal patient frightens relations and friends as well. We don't know what to do. We don't know what to say. Death doesn't exist in our society, especially the death of a child or adolescent. But being next to Julia and her family somehow didn't provoke all these things. Her home was full of people coming and going. Everybody seemed to be giving the best of themselves. And that's something that I realized that Julia was able to do. She was able to bring out the best in people. Julia wrote her dissertation, which we called her final exams at school, even if it was the middle school. And she, in fact, loved speaking, but at the end, the word was taken away from her. The story was about a soldier who went to war, and it's, of course, a metaphor for her struggle. And the soldier had a broken sword. One day she wanted me to hug her, and she wanted to feign her fainting as she had happened in hospital. I was embarrassed, but I felt I could do it for Julia. We were alone in the room. Her mother, Sarah, went out. There were lots of people on the other side of the door. And so I had to think, well, now Julia's going to ask this terrible question, will I get better? And I really had to steel myself because I've never lied to her. And yet Julia didn't say anything of that. She laughed, she smiled, she remembered great moments in hospital. She knew the answer and she was serene. As you have understood, Julia was a special person who was able to break down any barrier, all distances. And we don't think that she's an ideal model for the doctor-patient relationship because there are many ways of living through one's disease, many emotions, anger, the injustice of disease, and also religious belief and philosophical attitudes. What we have wanted to do just is to tell you what we live through as doctors and nurses. We wanted to tell you this precious story that we were privileged to witness. Thank you.
Doveva esserci con noi anche la dottoressa.
Well, Dr. Eugenia Giraldi, Wolf Alpha, had been invited, but she is pregnant. And indeed, it's the pregnancy is sort of war which has been knocked down by Julia. She sent us an email, which I'm going to read, to explain how Julia was able to knock down that wall. And the mail is this. Julia for us was a hero. She demonstrated all her fragility and fatigue in facing the discomfort of the disease. Afterwards, she changed a lot spiritually. Even though her clinical condition worsened, he was able to support us in our daily routine, and we were not feeling the bitterness of failure, but she made us enthusiastic in fighting for her. Anytime we tried to build a wall between her and us in order to be more objective, she knocked it down, also in the most difficult situations. And so we were brought to the heart of what being a doctor means, supporting other human beings. At the beginning, we were able to contain her and to maintain the classical relationship between doctor and patient. At the end, where our hopes were diminishing, we were really involved fully, and we became protagonists of her story. When she died, we were thinking of her with joy and love. That made our work even more important, and we were no longer afraid of being too much involved in the stories of our patients. We will never forget her. Now, the floor to Mrs. Bruna Togni, a nurse who nursed Julia.
E alla quale rilancerei la frase che mi ha detto.
And I'd like to repeat what Bruna told me the first time we met. She said, my way looking at life changed. There's something which questioned myself and the way I was working. So I decided to visit Julia at home, and I realized that my relationship with reality was very superficial. I will read because unfortunately I won't be able to speak. Indeed, it's difficult, Julia, not to make mistakes in describing you. You were fantastic. It's a honor for me to talk about you. Your mom and your dad welcome you with trust, and I hope I'm not going to disappoint them. But now I feel like since life is there, I saw your smiling eyes, and I saw desperation, joy, and hope there. I was like frozen. I was not able to understand how it came that you were so strong. It was horrible thinking of the death of a young woman tortured by cancer. When you go into a hospital, you are no longer Julia, a student, the son of your mother and your father. You turn into a sort of goldfish in a fish tank, hospitalized in a ward, and doctors and nurses are just white faces. When you get a disease, you're forced to stay in a room and share that room with people who may be different from you, and you are there to do what the white faces tell you to do. And then you realize that the other people, the patients, are like you, and the white faces, the pale faces, are there for you and with you, and a special relationship is formed, like it happened to me. I've been a nurse for 20 years, and I always tried to be balanced and not to be too much involved in the condition of patients. Now I understood new things. I'm no longer indignated because of certain conditions, and I have to thank you. My way of approaching people is different. I feel more involved. Maybe it's faith or something beyond, but it's very powerful. Describing what you had to go through your short life, well, it's very difficult to describe. You've been a very joyful, dynamic, cheerful girl, also during the disease, which was the time when we met. Our fates met at a very critical time of your life, and that was a very pleasant encounter, full of communication and understanding. There was a very good chemistry, and you came in a terrible practice in the hospital, and you brought light. You were cheerful and you know, like the people of your age, but you were afraid that you were facing something more difficult, but we didn't make us feel guilty for that. You were happy, and you made us happy. You were, in a way, disrespectful, carefree. You spoke about the wig and the makeup as if it was not important. You told us what happened, the difficulties of having chemotherapy or the use of cortisol, and I was impressed because you were able to smile and say everything is okay. How is it possible to remain serene after such a diagnosis when the death knocked at your door? And only Julia could be so aware, faithful, and smiling. You have been special because you were able to face this terrible condition with a hero at your side. Your mother has been a very important presence. You might not believe that, Julia, but I learned to understand and know my little patients. I learned to interpret the noises and to interpret what's inside the eyes and the heart of the patients. That is something which I learned in a resuscitation unit where my father was watching me and was asking for help. I was not able to do that, and he died there. That's why I learned to perceive what people are feeling. Now I feel safer, and this is thanks to your intuition. I am a nurse, and during the last part of your life, I concentrated on your bloody left hand. Friday, August the 18th, 2 years ago, you were in a bed, cared like a princess. Davide was with you. He was serene, and your daddy, Antonio, welcomed you as if you had not died, or you were not going to die, so he supported me. I felt like being in a very comfortable and a peaceful place. When you saw me, you were determined, as you have always been. You showed me your left hand. You had not lost your faith, and you have been able to weather the storm. Indeed, you have been a very special patient who made me better in a very difficult time of my career. And every time I am confronted with similar problems, I implement what I learned from you and the very special children from the cancer pediatric department. Now I can look things with a different with different eyes, and this is what I learned from your very short life. I understood your spirituality, and I hope I could learn to be strong as you are because of your faith. I remember your lively eyes. It was sort of a tunnel through which I could see hope, and I'm thinking of them, and I feel some form of emotional embarrassment because I'm thinking of a lot of feelings you stirred into me. I realized that I have been able to resort to a new ethical code. I rediscovered that life is sacred, and you have been able to knock down the door of the practice because you have always been confident in life. I'm not going to speak about ethics, morale, or spirituality. This is for the academy. I'd like to speak of the moments when things were difficult and you were confident when we were there to change the dressings on your hand. I don't think that I am a special person, but today I can state that this is not a job like the others, and that when I go outside the hospital, I don't forget what we do. We are health workers. We are not better than others, but without life, we would not have death or the after death. If you were here today, I will chase you in this big room because it's very difficult to understand me. I will tell you what a mess you made. I will smile at you and hug you very strong. The much with life, well, you have not lost it. I'm just a not important nurse, and what happened with you and with others is much bigger than I am, and I really admire your parents. So knowing you, working for you, is something which has really enriched me, and I hope I had understood and respected your thinking and that of your parents. Usually, when you meet a person, you get in love with what you think that person is, and not because of what this person is. I'm thinking of a person who has a very severe disease. That person has to trust doctors and nurses. They become fragile when confronted with the disease, and with those who have to help them, they become like servants. Just think when the disease affects a child or a girl like Giulia, Filippo, Andrea, Asia, Nico, and others. We have a double responsibility because young patients have no rules, no masks. They are sincere, unique, beautiful, spontaneous, and they trust their carers completely. And we need to support these families while their dearest are ill. So Giulia has been a real point of strength, a resource for health workers, and I hope that children with a disease and their families do find the strength to continue. So I cannot define your death, Giulia. I'm sure that is something which helps us to attach a new meaning to life. Giulia and her family were confronted with the disease, which was a very severe disease, and they gave us the strength to face that. And I now can say that the death of Giulia has an impact on the society because it has been an inspiration for our conscience.
Before we ask the last question of Giulia's mother, I'd like to underline a few things, because this is a trace and a sign that Giulia has left in our world of healthcare, because there are certain aspects that we have seen emerge from these doctors and the treating staff. First of all, we've seen a team that works together, that recognizes ahead, and in fact does not cede to conflict. And this is all important. You're friends only if you learn from one another, and that's not something which can be taken for granted working together today. Another fundamental aspect is that the fewer resources that we have, available for healthcare, the more important it is to identify the main needs of the patient, because we can't answer and fulfill all requests. We have to not lose sight of the main need of people. We want to treat the person as a whole. And indeed, as has been said, the physical healing is not necessarily the final aim. As Sarah said, the healing of the soul is all important. And that means that healthcare can't be planned at a table, and it makes us go back to the essence of what man is. Now, to look at this method that has been developed as a result of Gulia, we have in fact developed a congress, and you've got the flyers on your seats, because we think that in our work we can start by doing the things that are really necessary and required. So I invite you all to this meeting. I'd finally like to thank the people from Bergamo who indeed have insisted about coming here today and bearing witness at the meeting, so that everybody can learn about the story of Gulia and how she changed the hospital's approach. Because otherwise extraordinary events just are reduced to pure emotion, and therefore they don't last very long. Whereas they have the potential to become something much stronger, culture and a new approach. And this is what we see. The real emergency that we face is to rebuild things. And Gulia has underlined this and made this something that we became aware of. And Gulia was like a sign. A sign is not just a particular patient case, but it's a sign to hook into the heavens, as she called her video. And along the road, we meet extraordinary people like her, and people who work and are prepared to change. So thank you, Gulia, for this. And she has given us the possibility of being creative. I don't know if you've seen in the video the school with the people who came to the hospital to teach. And this all got underway thanks to Gulia's requirements. I'd like to ask a question of Sarah, Gulia's mother, because we have to ask ourselves why this young girl of 12 in 2 years of disease, how come she was able to enact this change and be so contagious in her attitude? What was it in her? What was her special thing, this ability to pray, not only asking but also thanking, this extraordinary mature attitude she had, as we saw in her attitude to love, this very strong faith that she had that allowed her to say that if death was her fate, she was fully trustful in God. And I think that it would be wrong not to follow her right up to the hilt, to remember her in this. So I'd like to ask her mother, who said that her daughter was already miles and outstripped them so much. I'd like to ask her. Now, to understand who Gulia was, I'm just going to tell you one episode in her short breath of life. It was a time when Gulia, despite the disease, until she could, wanted to bear witness. She liked to talk to young people. She was invited in schools, to oratories, and also to churches. And I remember in particular when there was a testimony that she wanted to, in fact, go to. She was often very sick, the effects of chemotherapy and the treatment, but determined as she was, she said, no, I have to go, Mama, I want to go, even if I wanted to just keep her at home. And she said, well, give me all the medicines, let's take the various blankets and everything else. And we went, and afterwards I realized how much she wanted to be a witness and bear witness and be a tool in the hands of the Lord. So I gave her the medicines and the drugs, and we left. But the only thing that I asked her was that she, in fact, would recite the prayer to the Holy Spirit. And she didn't prepare anything, and when she got there, she, in fact, would speak for an hour as if she'd prepared everything. And Julia bore witness throughout her life. All her life was a witness that she bore. And we like to talk about this, especially once when Julia went to the old city on the top of the hill of Bergamo, and those were the days when we went to have radiotherapy at Padua. She would get up at 8 and then do some lessons, and then she would have to travel a long way to do radiotherapy and come back late. And that day, in fact, that one day that we went, there was some problems with the radiotherapy, and we got back at 4:30, which was the time when Julia was scheduled to bear witness in a place. And therefore we suggested to Julia that we shouldn't go, that we were all tired, we'd eaten something on the hoof, but we were all tired, and so we suggested that she shouldn't go. We said, "You're not necessary, they're the catechists, they'll be there and do it." And Julia said, "No, we're going to go." And so when we left the motorway, we turned towards the high town to go to the place. And we recited the Holy Spirit. And when she entered the room, she said the first thing to heal, she said, is inside. Well, health, and she did this with her hands, that will come by itself, she said. The first thing to heal is the soul. Antonio, my husband, and I looked at each other and said to each other, well, how come with everything that we're trying to do to heal her, we realized that she was light years ahead of us.
Se vogliamo parlare della Fiorentina, vi ringrazio.
Niente, aggiungo ancora un altro episodio, visto che comunque...
Let me tell you another anecdote. In the last month of her life, she told us that we don't thank God enough. So she wrote a prayer to thank God, because she said in all the prayers that we say, we are asking to receive something, pray for us, and so on. So she listed all the reasons why we have to thank God. And so it was good to say that prayer. And she prepared the sentences replacing Hail Mary, and she tested it and rewrote it many times. So, I was saying it, and she stopped me, and she asked me, "Are you asking something to God?" "No," I said, "because I'm thanking Him, otherwise I will have to rewrite everything." And it was very difficult for me, because she has been writing that for 1 month, and then the last part, well, she, dictated that to me exactly 2 years ago, the night before she died. the 18th of August, and she thanks for wonderful health she had the last day. She was no longer healthy, but she was referring to the health of her heart and her spirit. At the beginning of August, she met a painter, Mr. Gamba, and she asked him to paint her little crown. And she said, I want to have Jesus and the Virgin smiling. I want them serene because we are thanking them, and they are receiving a girl who is running towards them. And then he made a cross, and which was put between Jesus and the Virgin. And she walked in and she said, it's a wonderful painting, but well, that cross should be behind me because it's God who sheds light. And when the painter came back with a new painting, well, that was the 16th of August, so she saw the painting and she said, that's right, very good, but I'm mentioning the Trinity. Will you make the Trinity? And he was a bit afraid because, it's very difficult to describe the Trinity with words, but I can try. Maybe I can have Jesus Christ mirroring God the Father with some colors between the two, which is the Holy Ghost. Wonderful. That's a very good description, but people won't understand that that is the Holy Spirit. Let's put the dove there, and that was ready the 22nd of August, which was the day in which we had a funeral, but the crown is there.
Grazie, Giulia.
Thank you, Julia, for showing us that you don't defeat darkness by lighting a lamp, but by talking of the situation. And thank you, Antonio, for showing us that in a situation as you faced, you in fact were able to not blow out the light, but to fill your lungs with thanks.